6 a.m., April 27, 2022. Changi Prison, Singapore. A man is taken from his cell. He is 33 years old. He has an IQ of 69. He has spent the last decade in solitary confinement. 3 square meters. A toilet. A mat. A bucket. 23 hours a day. Alone. His mental health has deteriorated so badly that in his final days, his brother reported he was hallucinating. He thought his cell was a garden. He thought he was safe. He was not safe. He was about to be hanged. His crime? He was arrested in 2009 with 42.7 grams of heroin strapped to his thigh. Less than 3 tablespoons. He claimed he was coerced. That a mastermind threatened to kill his girlfriend and his family. That he did it to pay off debts. The court did not care. The mandatory death penalty in Singapore does not allow for mitigating circumstances. Nagaenthran K, Dharmalingam walked to the gallows. A hood was placed over his head. A noose around his neck. The trapdoor opened. He fell. And Singapore hanged a man with an intellectual disability for carrying 42 grams of heroin. Welcome to Singapore's death penalty system. The strictest in the world. Before we go inside Changi Prison, before we talk about the executions, the conditions, the system that kills more people per capita than almost any country on earth, subscribe right now. This is not a story about justice. This is a story about a machine, a system that runs on fear, and it does not stop. Hit like, drop a comment. Should Singapore abolish the death penalty? Let's start at the beginning. With the law. Singapore has 33 offenses that warrant the death penalty. 33. Murder, drug trafficking, terrorism, use of firearms, kidnapping, treason, all capital crimes. But the one that dominates the executions, the one that fills Changi Prison's death row, is drug trafficking. Since 1975, drug trafficking has carried a mandatory death sentence if the amount exceeds a specific threshold. Mandatory. That means the judge has no discretion, no ability to consider mitigating circumstances, no room for mercy. If you are caught with 15 grams of heroin, half an ounce, you face the death penalty. 30 grams of cocaine, 250 grams of methamphetamine, 500 grams of cannabis. Those are the thresholds. Cross them and you die. In 2012, Singapore amended the law. Judges were given limited discretion to impose life imprisonment instead of death, but only if the offender was a courier who cooperated with authorities. For everyone else, the mandatory death penalty remains, and it is enforced relentlessly. Between 1991 and 2022, Singapore executed more than 400 people. 400, most of them for drug offenses. In 2022, Singapore resumed executions after a 2-year COVID hiatus. Since then, they have hanged 15 people, all of them for drugs. In 2025, Singapore executed 17 people, the highest number since 2003. The country has a population of 6 million. Per capita, Singapore executes more people than almost any other nation on earth. Only China, Iran, and Saudi Arabia execute more in absolute numbers. And here is the part that shocks the world. Singapore is proud of it. 80% of Singaporeans support the death penalty. 80%. The government defends it. The public supports it. And the executions continue. Every Friday morning. At 6 a.m. Like clockwork. If you fly into Singapore, you hear it before you land. A woman's voice comes over the loudspeaker. Drug trafficking may be punishable by death. The announcement plays as the plane descends. As passengers stow their tray tables. As children look out the window at the city below. It is a warning. It is a threat. And it is real. Singapore's borders are lined with posters. Say no to drugs. Death penalty for drug traffickers. The message is everywhere. The government wants you to know. If you bring drugs into Singapore, you will die. And they mean it. Changi Prison Complex, Eastern Singapore. Built in the shadow of the country's main airport. A walled compound of guard towers and imposing gates. 13 separate complexes. More than 10,000 inmates. Most of them serving time for drug offenses. Inside, the maximum security wing holds the country's most dangerous offenders. Murderers, drug traffickers, violent criminals. And in a separate section, isolated from the rest of the prison, is death row. 24 cells arranged in a horseshoe shape around an open-air exercise yard. The yard is enclosed in steel bars. A wire mesh roof to prevent escape by helicopter. The cells are 3 square meters, roughly 32 square feet. Walls on 3 sides. Vertical bars on the 4th. A toilet. A sleeping mat. A bucket for washing. No air conditioning. No natural airflow. The heat is unbearable. Some inmates sleep on the concrete floor because it is cooler than the mat. This is where Singapore's condemned prisoners live. For years. Sometimes decades. Waiting. Hold on. Before we get to what life on death row actually looks like, I need you to subscribe if you haven't already. Because what happens next, the isolation, the routine, the psychological torture of knowing you will die, but not when, is the part that breaks people. Drop a comment. Is Singapore's death penalty system too harsh? Keep watching. Death row inmates in Singapore are kept in strict solitary confinement. 23 hours a day. Every day. They are allowed 1 hour of exercise. But even then, they are kept apart. Separated by mesh dividers, so they cannot see each other. They can shout from cell to cell. They can speak through the mesh. But they cannot touch. They cannot see. They cannot be together. Meals are delivered through a slot in the cell door. For slices of bread for breakfast. A hot drink. Lunch and dinner come the same way. Pushed through the hatch. Eaten alone. Prison authorities supervise them constantly. Security cameras inside the cells. Over the toilets. Everywhere. 5 guards monitor an entire floor from an air-conditioned room they call the fish tank. Every letter is filtered. Every phone call is monitored. During COVID, death row inmates were allowed 30 minutes of phone privileges per week. Now the borders are open. The phone calls have stopped. Families from Malaysia, where most death row inmates come from, can visit. But they sit behind glass. They cannot touch. They cannot hold hands. They cannot embrace. They talk. They weep. And they leave. The isolation destroys people. Psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. Nagentran's brother described his final days. He was hallucinating. He was incoherent. He imagined his cell was a garden. He told his family he was coming home, that he would eat home-cooked food with them. He had no idea he was about to die. Other inmates deteriorate differently. Some become silent, withdrawn. Some rage. Some weep constantly. Some lose the ability to communicate. The human brain is not built for this. For years of isolation. For the knowledge that death is coming but not knowing when. It is torture. Slow. Methodical. Legal. A day or 2 before execution, the inmate is allowed to change out of prison uniform. They can wear their own clothes, or clothes provided by the prison. And then, in one of the most surreal and disturbing practices in Singapore's system, they are made to pose for a photo shoot. The prison authorities say it is for the families. A last memory, a final image. Some inmates smile. Some stand stiffly. Some look directly at the camera. The photos are taken against a white floral curtain. Professional. Staged. Horrifying. Critics call it tasteless. Cruel. A mockery. The government defends it. They say it is compassionate. That families deserve a last image. But the families are the ones who suffer. Who look at those photos and weep. Who carry them forever. When an execution is scheduled, the inmate is given a notice. Sometimes a week in advance. Sometimes days. The notice arrives, and the clock starts ticking. Families scramble. Lawyers file last-minute appeals. Activists protest. But the system does not stop. In November 2024, Singapore executed 3 people in 1 week. Rosman Abdullah, 55 years old. Trafficking 57 grams of heroin. Hanged. Another Singaporean. Name not released. hanged. Sammy Nathan Selvaraju, 42, Malaysian, hanged. 3 men, 1 week, all dead, all for drugs. Real quick, if you're still watching, you need to subscribe. Because what happens next, Nagentran's case, the appeals, the international outcry, and the execution itself, is the part that exposes the cruelty of the system. Comment below. Is mandatory death penalty for drugs justified? Now, back to Nagentran. April 2009. Woodlands checkpoint. The border between Malaysia and Singapore. A 21-year-old Malaysian man named Nagaenthran K. Dharmalingam crosses into Singapore. Police stop him. They search him. They find a bundle strapped to his thigh. 42.7 grams of morphine. Heroin. Nagentran is arrested. He confesses. But he claims he was coerced. That a mastermind in Malaysia assaulted him. Threatened to kill his girlfriend. Threatened to kill his family. That he agreed to carry the drugs to pay off debts. He says he did not know what was in the bundle. Later, he denies that too. The prosecution does not care. The drugs exceed the 15-gram threshold. The mandatory death penalty applies. Nagentran is charged, and his life is over. During the trial, Nagentran is assessed by psychologists. His IQ is tested. The result, 69. 69. That places him in the lowest 2% of the population. Internationally, an IQ below 70 is recognized as an intellectual disability. Dr. Ronglum Kian, a psychiatrist, testifies. He says Nagentran suffers from severe alcohol use disorder, severe ADHD, borderline intellectual functioning, possibly mild intellectual disability. Another psychiatrist, Dr. Kenneth Ko, agrees that Nagentran has borderline intelligence and cognitive deficits. He states that these deficits may have contributed toward his misdirected loyalty and poor assessment of the risks in agreeing to carry out the offense. The judge rejects the evidence. The court rules that Nagentran knew what he was doing, that he understood the law, that his borderline intelligence does not diminish his culpability. On November 22, 2010, Nagentran is convicted, sentenced to death, and sent to Changi Prison. He is 22 years old. Nagentran spends 12 years on death row. 12 years. In a 3-square-meter cell. Alone. His lawyers file appeals. Every one is rejected. In 2012, Singapore amends the death penalty laws. Judges are given discretion to impose life imprisonment for drug couriers who cooperate. Nagentran's lawyers argue he qualifies. The court disagrees. They rule he is not substantially mentally or intellectually disabled, that he does not meet the threshold for resentencing. The appeals continue, and they fail. Every time. In November 2021, Nagentran is scheduled to be hanged, but he contracts COVID-19. The execution is postponed. His lawyers file another appeal. It is dismissed on March 29, 2022. Chief Justice Sundaresh Menon delivers the verdict. He condemns the lawyers for abusing the court process. He says there is no evidence of any deterioration in Nagentran's mental faculties. The appeal is dismissed. The execution is rescheduled. The world is watching. The United Nations issues a statement. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights condemns the execution. The use of the death penalty for drug-related offenses is incompatible with international human rights law. Malaysia's Prime Minister writes to Singapore, begging for mercy. The European Union issues a statement. Amnesty International launches a petition. Over 8,000 people sign it. British billionaire Richard Branson appeals publicly. British actor Stephen Fry does the same. Human rights groups around the world condemn Singapore. And Singapore does not care. The government responds. They say Nagentran received a fair trial, that he was not intellectually disabled, that the courts assessed him thoroughly, that the law is clear, that the execution will proceed. April 26, 2022. The day before the execution. Nagentran's family travels to Changi Prison. His mother, his brother Navin, his sister Sarmala. They sit behind glass. They look at him. And Nagentran talks about coming home. He talks about eating home-cooked food with his family. He talks about taking baths, about sitting in a garden. He has no idea he is going to die. His brother later tells reporters, he talked about coming home. It broke my heart that he seemed to think he was coming home. At the end of the visit, Nagentran reaches through a gap in the glass screen. His family does the same. They grasp each other's hands tightly. They weep. Nagentran cries, "Ma, Ma." His voice echoes through the room. And then they are separated, and he is taken back to his cell. 6 a.m., April 27, 2022. Changi Prison. Nagaenthran K. Dharmalingam is brought to the execution chamber. His hands are tied behind his back. A hood is placed over his head. He is led to the gallows. A noose is placed around his neck. The knot is positioned behind his right ear to ensure the spinal cord snaps. The trapdoor opens. Nagentran falls. He hangs. Less than 30 minutes later, he is pronounced dead. He is 33 years old. His body is released to his family. They take him back to Malaysia, to Ipoh. They bury him in a proper Muslim ceremony. And Singapore moves on. The execution is complete. The law has been enforced. The system continues. After Nagentran's execution, there is no national outcry in Singapore. No protests in the streets. No widespread condemnation. A few hundred people gather at Hong Lim Park, the only place in Singapore where public assembly is allowed, and hold a candlelight vigil. The media reports the execution, and then it is forgotten. The government issues a statement defending the decision. They say the death penalty is necessary, that it deters crime, that Singapore is one of the safest countries in the world because of it. And most Singaporeans agree. 80%. 80% of the population supports the death penalty. They believe it works. They believe it keeps them safe. And they do not question it. Here is the uncomfortable truth. There is no evidence that the death penalty deters drug trafficking better than life imprisonment. None. Studies comparing Hong Kong, which has no death penalty, and Singapore, which executes relentlessly, found similar homicide rates. The rates are the same. The deterrent effect is a myth. But Singapore does not care about the studies. They care about perception, about fear, about the message. And the message is clear. If you traffic drugs in Singapore, you will die. That message works. Not because it stops traffickers, but because it keeps the public compliant. Here is who Singapore executes. Ethnic minorities, foreigners, people from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds. Most death row inmates in Singapore are Malay or Indian. Most are from Malaysia. Most are poor. Most are low-level couriers, mules, people at the bottom of the drug trade. They are not kingpins. They are not masterminds. They are not the people making money. They are desperate, coerced, vulnerable. And they are the ones who die. The big players, the organizers, the financiers, the leaders, are never caught. They do not cross borders with drugs strapped to their bodies. They stay safe. And the system kills the poor, the marginalized, the powerless, and calls it justice. July 28, 2023. Singapore executes a woman for the first time in 20 years. Suraidwi Jamani, Singaporean, convicted of possessing 30 grams of heroin for the purposes of trafficking. 30 grams. She is hanged at Changi Prison. Amnesty International condemns it. The UN condemns it. Malaysia condemns it. And Singapore does not stop. The executions continue. More names. More notices. More hangings. Rasman Abdullah. Muhammad Aziz bin Hussein. Tang Hai Liang. Fung Chi Peng. Muhammad Rizwan bin Akbar Hussein. The list grows. And the system does not stop. Singapore's death penalty is not chaotic. It is not emotional. It is precise, methodical, clinical. The executions happen on Friday mornings at 6 a.m. The inmates are weighed. The noose is measured according to their weight. The drop is calculated to snap the spinal cord. The process takes less than 30 minutes. It is efficient. It is brutal. And it is legal. The prison officers who carry out the executions are bound by the Official Secrets Act. They cannot speak about what they do. They cannot share details. They cannot question orders. They are part of the machine, and the machine does not stop. Is this justice? Or is this state-sanctioned murder? That is the question Singapore forces you to confront. The country is wealthy, safe, orderly. It has one of the lowest crime rates in the world, and it achieves that through fear, through punishment, through executions. But at what cost? Nagentran Dharmalingam had an IQ of 69. He was intellectually disabled. He was coerced, and he was hanged for carrying less than 3 tablespoons of heroin. Is that proportionate? Is that justice? Or is that cruelty disguised as law? Singapore says it is necessary, that the death penalty protects society, that it keeps drugs out, that it saves lives. But the evidence does not support that. The studies do not support that. What it does is kill, efficiently, relentlessly, without mercy. Singapore has executed more than 400 people since 1991, most of them for drug offenses. In 2025 alone, they hanged 17 people, the highest number in over 20 years. The system is not slowing down. It is accelerating. Nagaenthran K, Dharmalingam was 33 years old when he was hanged. He had an IQ of 69. He spent 12 years in solitary confinement. He hallucinated in his final days. He thought he was coming home. He was not coming home. He was walking to the gallows. And Singapore killed him for carrying 42 grams of heroin. 80% of Singaporeans support the death penalty. They believe it works. They believe it keeps them safe. But the people who die are not the kingpins. They are not the masterminds. They are the poor, the desperate, the vulnerable. And they are hanged at 6 a.m. every Friday, like clockwork. Is that justice? Or is that a machine that cannot be stopped? If you want more stories like this, cases where the system is brutal and the world looks away, check out my video on the countries that still execute for drugs. Link on screen. Subscribe, because I cover cases like this every single week. And comment below. Should Singapore abolish the death penalty? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.